Hello, welcome to my first live stream in a while. It's been a hot minute. I think the last time I did one of these was November 2023, so it's been a while. If you're new here, if you're new to my page, if you're new to my work, my name is Lauren Gilbert. I am a spiritual coach, an energetic healer, an aromatherapist, and I'm very busy also in the world of tech, design, computer programming, and what it takes to actually put your message out to the world in today's very complicated world of technology. Also, very exciting world, but let's face it, kind of complicated world of tech because there's just so much information out there. So today I'm going to be combining some of my favorite topics, which is our spiritual health and healing with aromatherapy, and I'm using some of the modern tech to put this out into the world live. So yeah, here we are, and let's get into it. So yesterday I put a post out across different social media platforms where I shared that I grew up in a cult system. This is something that I had not previously put out there in such a public way. I think because it's something that you have to be personally ready to do, and you have to have a reason to want to do it. For people who've been in a cult environment, especially young in life, and gotten out, or found themselves caught up in a cult even midlife, it can be a very, I want to say almost, for some people it can be shameful to talk about, but for others it's just confusing, because when, let's say, I have mentioned to people in the past, like, oh yeah, I grew up in like a cult, the first question out of people's mouths is usually like, oh my God, what one was it? What did they do? Like there's all these questions that kind of like come at you when you put this information forward, which can be really, really overwhelming. When you grow up in a cult environment, your entire worldview is shaped in a certain way, down to the food you eat, the clothes you wear, the way you view yourself, life, the universe. And when you get out of a situation like that, you spend a lot of the rest of your life kind of redeveloping a sense of self and a sense of how does the world work and how do I fit in it. And so when people kind of just like come at you with like, oh, which one was it and what do they do? And they have like all these preconceived notions of cults because of things they've seen on like a Netflix documentary or whatever. It's very overwhelming, and it can just be so much easier to say nothing or keep that information to yourself, which is a really good point if you're somebody who's working as a therapist and you have a friend or a contact who is brave enough to disclose this information to you. Maybe a tip is don't start out by first of all like jumping down their throat with like which one, or was it the Mormons or was it the Jehovah's, or like putting words in people's mouths. A much better response for someone to receive who's disclosed that information might be like, oh, thank you for sharing that with me, or oh, that's really interesting. I'd like to hear about it more sometime. Maybe we can have a coffee or a tea, but no pressure. It's just kind of like, thank you for trusting me with that information, and then leave it. And that person will give you more information as in when they're ready, which could be never. It might be that step they took was just to say like, yeah, that was where I was, and like I'll let you know where I'm at with it. So when somebody grows up in that environment, as I said before, their entire worldview is shaped for them. And it's usually quite an extreme situation. Cults are generally religious in nature, religious or spiritual, but not always. Sometimes there are cults that revolve around a business, a certain way that you have to do business and get clients and network. Sometimes there are cults around what I would say more is like fitness and lifestyle. I guess that the main point is a cult is anything that uses group dynamics to try and tell you how and who and what you need to be. So they do that by using the group dynamic, so kind of like peer pressure, community pressure, because everyone else is doing something, it must be right. And if you don't want to do that, then you are negative, or you are wrong, or you are bad, which could be a verbal, but most of the time it's nonverbal. It's like, oh, you just won't be included, or you won't get the rewards, or you won't get the affirmation and the confirmation and the praise. So it's a very subtle yet deep kind of psychological process where a person is made to feel by the group that they need to follow the group's agenda, or there's something that's not okay with that person. Other things to look out for are, there's a sense of what you, any time there's a group telling you what you should eat, what you should wear, what kind of material you should be engaging with in terms of like books, television, movies, music. Anytime there's sort of a group system that wants to control how you identify or express yourself or your feelings, these are red flags for cult environments. And it's really hard when, you know, you're in one of these cults to sometimes understand that, because often the way this information will be presented is that it's for your best interest. It's because we love you. It's because we want you to be safe. We want you to be healthy. We want you to have a good life. We want you to go to heaven. Or it's like a fear-based thing. We don't want you to go to hell. We don't want you to be unhealthy. We don't want these terrible things to happen to you. And that's why we have to put all these restrictions in place for your betterment, for your protection. So anytime you're in an environment where like you start seeing these controls, it's a red flag. But to understand, like if you have a customer, a client, or a friend who's been in this situation, when you're in that dynamic, you just don't have a clue. It's kind of like when you're a kid and you grow up in your own house and you just think, yeah, everybody lives this way. And then you get a bit older and you go to other people's houses and you just see like, oh, not everybody eats dinner the way my family does, or not everybody's mom is super messy or super clean or whatever. Like you have no clue when you're in these environments that the rest of the world is different. The only thing that you are generally made to understand is that the outside world or the other people are somehow unsafe, need to be saved. We should feel sorry for them. We should want to help them, but we can't be like part of that group or part of the mainstream because it's not safe, it's not good, you know. So I personally don't like to get into the details of what kind of cult system that I was exposed to growing up, because there are a couple of reasons for that. One, I just don't really find it helpful. And two, I don't really want to put more energy into it. I kind of feel like the more you say the names of certain things, the more, I don't know, it sort of like gives almost like a charge to the energy around them. And so when people say like, oh, was it like the Mormons? I usually just go, yeah, something like that. And I like to put awareness on this because there are so many different kinds of cults, also religious groups, and they're not always like the ones you've seen a documentary about on Netflix. There are so many groups that can just pop up. There are, you know, sects of religions that might be considered a mainstream religion, but this particular sect, this particular group would be a more extreme case. And you get kind of pulled into this group, or, you know, or like, I just don't want this bias to continue that there's like the big groups. I mean, yes, there are, but there are all kinds of ways and all kinds of groups that people have been pulled into or may have been brought up in, and you may not have heard of them. And so when someone like discloses that, and the first thing you say, oh, was it so and so? And then they're like, no, or, and you know, you start wanting a lot of extra information about like, well, what was it? It's very overwhelming for the person. So again, like, please be aware there are just so many different kinds of cult environments that people get pulled into, and it's important to not put pressure on the person who's trusting you to disclose some of that information to about the specifics and the details. Another thing is that for someone to leave a cult, I'm sorry if I keep moving my eye, but it's allergy season here in the Netherlands, and I feel like I just walked my dog and there's like a piece of pollen in my eye or something. So if I'm not crying, I'm not getting emotional, it's like I really feel like there's something in my eye. So I'll try to stop messing with it. But when people are in a cult, there's so much pressure to stay in, and if they have the deep courage and conviction to leave, there's often a huge amount of fear involved for that person for maybe the rest of their life, but for sure like a good while after they leave. I'm talking years. And there's a sense that because they left, they're going to be punished. They may be being ignored. They may be being shunned. They may be being threatened. You have no idea. And so when someone goes through the process to leave and then, like they look over their shoulder. I spent a long time in my life looking over my shoulder, wondering when the other shoe was going to drop. And there's a sense of like, oh, these groups have so much power. Because when you're in one, they do. You give your power, knowingly or unknowingly, over to this group dynamic, and they do have control over a huge part of your life. And when you leave, you're still kind of programmed, and you still believe that this group is going to have power or control over your life, and they can make things happen. In some cases, they can. In some cases, people sign over their financial or legal rights to groups, and then the group does have actual power over parts of their life when they leave, and it's very frightening. It's very upsetting for people to go through that. And even if it's been like a certain number of years since they've left, there can still be this lingering sense of like, oh, but they're going to get me, they're going to find me, they're going to do something with me, they're going to whatever. And that's a very real kind of like fear and a process that people go through. So again, it's like, don't pressure people to give too much information, as curious and as helpful as you might want to be. And remember, a lot of these people have been like really severely manipulated under the pretense of someone wanting to help them. So it just doesn't work when you're working with this kind of group of people. So what does being in a cult spiritually do to a person? I am not a psychologist, I'm not a doctor, I am not a lawyer, I am not any of these things, but I have spent a huge amount of my life unpicking spiritual abuse. Because for me, a cult is spiritual abuse. It is a group that makes a person feel that they are not good, that they are not worthy, that they are bad, that they are somehow fundamentally flawed if they don't maintain the same set of beliefs as the group. This is a type of, I guess if you really want to split hairs, this is psychological abuse, this is emotional abuse, but for me, the area that I've kind of specialized my life in has been spirituality, and for me, this is a type of spiritual abuse. What is spiritual abuse? What is the impact that has on somebody while they're in a cult and when they are out of a cult? So spiritual abuse, I think I've already kind of summed it up a bit, but to get really clear on that, it's when you or your group tries to make someone else feel that their inherent connection to the divine is flawed. I think that's the best way I can put it. It's the feeling that you as a human being who have been born with an inherent connection to the divine, no matter what you do, if you're a horrible human being, a saint, somewhere in the middle, it doesn't matter. You have an inherent connection to the divine. Spiritual abuse is something that comes in and tries to make you feel that that connection is flawed and needs to be improved. Needs to be corrected, needs to be saved, needs to be helped, needs to be disciplined, whatever. It makes you feel that that connection is flawed. That is what happens when you are in a cult system. The implications of that are enormous. your ability to walk around, my ability, all humans' ability to walk around and function in the world has to do with a sense of self, a sense of identity, and a sense of, yes, of self-worth and of being okay because you're just you. You're just this person who's here on the planet walking around doing your thing. On a spiritual level, this really comes from the universal fact that every living person on this planet has an inherent connection to the divine, to spirit, that is unbreakable, unshakable, uncorruptible. No matter what you've done, you're going to die, and so am I. And we don't really know where we go or what happens when we die, but we know we're all going to the same place. The afterlife, whatever that is. And so when people come in and they start giving you a story of like, no, you're flawed, your connection to the divine is somehow flawed, and if you don't correct or whatever, you're going to go to a different place than I'm going. So I'm going to go to heaven, you're going to go to hell. I'm going to go to paradise, to the chosen place, whatever, and you're going to go to some place bad where you don't get to go because you're flawed and you didn't fix that before you died. This is basically the story that religious cults have to tell you, that you are inherently flawed and you're going to end up in a bad place if you don't fix that during the course of your life. Whereas I personally do not believe that for a second. I think anybody who says they have the answer to that, I would really like to know how. But for me, my feeling is we are all one. We are all a spark of the divine in play. We all are born, we all die. And I believe that the playing field is actually pretty level in that sense. I didn't come from, a special kind of birth, and I don't believe that I'm going to have a special kind of death. I think we're all pretty equal on that. We all have the same kind of footing. But a cult will come in and start to change the story around that. Let's say it's not a religious cult, it's a financial or a fitness cult. Again, it will be this sense of like something about you is inherently flawed. Your body, your finances, your lifestyle, whatever it is, and if you don't correct it, you are not okay, and we will help you to, remedy that or change that. The focus is my dog in the background. The focus is on what your flaws are, and it's inherently about undermining your self-esteem so that you will give your power to a leader or a group of leaders. That's it. And on the spiritual side of that, it's that there's something flawed about your connection to the divine that you need to correct. That just has such a huge implication to the self-esteem and the self-worth of an individual, because like when you grow up in that environment, you are one of the chosen people. You are great. Your connection to the divine is like supercharged because you were so lucky to be born into this group or this cult who have like this secret, insight into how to have like an ultra connection to the divine, and you're gonna be good. And when you leave, you lose that. And like that's in the back of your mind all the time. Like, oh, I used to have this like super tight hookup with, God or whatever, and now I don't. So I'm probably gonna end up in a gutter somewhere or in hell or whatever. They're gonna come after me, they're gonna punish me. It's this whole thing that happens with your self-esteem, and it's a big deal. And even years after you leave such a situation, it can cause you to feel that you're not capable of making good decisions, you're not capable of feeling safe, and you're not capable of trusting yourself and trusting your higher power, your higher intuition. Another really interesting thing, I have discussed this with other people who have left cult groups who I've met later in life, is the guilt that you go through for hurting the people you've left. And it's interesting because you're in an abusive situation, but it's like your whole family or your whole world, and you need to leave in order to be who you need to be. But the people you leave behind are devastated that you've left because for them, they're still in the worldview, and you are someone that they deeply love and care about, and you are now going to hell. You are now going to be in some way like not in a good place because of this, and their grief is real. So you have this like, I don't even know if it's a double or triple punch to the gut, but like it's so hard to leave, and then you leave and you go through like the shunning and the shaming and the fear. And then the icing on the cake is you feel like garbage because you know you have so deeply hurt the people who now are just devastated that they're not going to see you in their special afterlife place because you left. This is another like really major psychological issue that people who left cults go through. And one of the most healing things for me was to be able to talk about that with another person who left a cult. And actually, they brought it up, and I was like, yeah, you're right. Like, until they had put words to it, that's just something I'd been carrying around in my heart for like 20 years that I'd never been able to identify. And I thought, yeah, exactly. Like, you then deal with the guilt that they're so hurt and you feel responsible. Of course, you're not. Everyone gets to choose and everyone gets to be responsible for their own feelings, but cults are not generally the most emotionally healthy and psychologically advanced environments. So there's a lot of projection. In fact, it's mostly projection. So when that comes at you that like an immediate family member or your entire family are devastated because you're not going to be in the special afterlife place, it's a huge pill to swallow. And it's something that the person who leaves generally has to carry on their own or with the help of like a support group or therapist if they have them. So that's kind of like, I just want to get in, like, I don't want to make this a super long video, but that's some of the nuts and bolts of, hey, what are cults? What happens to a person spiritually when they're in? What happens when they leave? And the last thing I wanted to talk about was just a little bit of aromatherapy that can help. I think the first couple of years that I was out, I literally lived in a sense of terror a couple hours a day. Like there's parts of you that like push it out and you're like, nope, this isn't actually what I believe, that I'm going to be going to hell or whatever, but like your entire network is gone. There's no support. You have to completely reinvent yourself from the ground up. And I would just have moments of just being terrified. Nature helped me so much. Meditating in nature was probably the most healing thing. I also worked with a shamanic healer at a very, like almost from day one. Like I really took the approach of like, I'm going to do this and I'm going to need help. So nature, working with energy healers, working with spiritual coaches, and aromatherapy also did a lot for me. And I'm just going to share with you 3 that I found to be the most helpful. And I'll tell you why. So the first one that I have is marjoram. And marjoram is an essential oil that has always made me feel that I wasn't alone. It has always helped me to like really connect with that inner sense of self. Because when you leave a cult, you feel really alone. You have this sense of like, I don't know who to turn to or who to talk to. You need to go inward and also, have support, but marjoram really helped me to do that. The other one is clementine. This is just such a bright, sparkly, joyful one that it would make me feel that I'm going to let my dog out 1 second. Okay, so clementine would make me feel that the sunshine just came back in, because there would be times where, again, you just have such a dark feeling. I get this heavy feeling of like, I've betrayed everyone I know. I had to, or I was betraying myself. Like you can go in some really, really dark spirals of like, I have no idea who I am. I don't know how to find out who I am. And clementine just always brought that light and the sparkle of the sun back into my life. And the other is just lavender. Lavender misted on a pillow. There were so many times that just lying down in a quiet space and just taking a moment and just breathe the lavender, listen to the sounds out the window, come back into my body, just feel the presence of I'm in my body in the now. It just did a lot for me. It still does, actually. It's still something I love to use. And the nice thing thing is if you combine all three of these, they actually smell really nice together. Marjoram, lavender, and clementine, they have a really beautiful smell. If you don't have clementine, get sweet orange, it's fine. I just find that clementine is just like a little bit brighter. There's more I have to say about this, but I think I'm gonna save that for another video. I wanna talk about, in the next video, I wanna talk about the karmic implications of being born into a cult and leaving a cult, and the kind of people who often find themselves on that life path and what that means. Because I believe pretty strongly that if you're a person who was in a group and you got out, you have something really important to do with your life, maybe. But I mean, I guess what I want to say is you owe yourself a really big hug and a really big like armful of support, because you have broken a system that for 99% of people, especially if you're born into it, is unbreakable. There are some really potent and specific karmic and life path, I guess, kind of things, for lack of a better word, that come with that. And I want to do the next video about that because, yes, I think that's really important information. Also for people who are maybe just starting to realize, like, hey, I'm in this situation, and maybe it's not a full-blown cult, but it doesn't feel right. It's going in a direction I don't want to be in. Oh, political cults. I forgot that one. Politics can be a big one too. Or you have a family member who, well, probably not a family member because then you'd be in it too. A friend, a colleague, or a client. And I think that, you know, the karmic implications of this are really interesting to look at, and I want to talk through that in another video. So that's it for now. I really hope this has been helpful or interesting to you. I have a lot of resources on my website. You can book personal sessions with me. You can download a course or a workbook at a pretty low cost. I have coaching programs. Check it out, because if a lot of my stuff, it's not specifically designed for people who are trying to get out of cults or who have left and are trying to reframe their life, but it's all the juice of what's going to power up your life when you have made a big change, whether that's leaving a cult, a divorce, whatever it is. A lot of the resources on my website and in my work are about how to reconnect with you and rebuild you in a healthy, stable, and grounded way, and I've tried to make that as accessible as possible. So it's blossomwitch.com. Check it out, see if there's something there for you. Send me a message. I'd love to know your thoughts about this. If you want to get in with me for a private reading or session, it's on the website, and I would certainly love to hear from you. Thank you very much. Sorry for the interruption about my dog, but that's dogs. And I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.